Raymond Arroyo is an internationally recognized award-winning journalist, producer, and New York Times best-selling author. He has in the past worked for the Associated Press and as a Capitol Hill correspondent. In addition to anchoring all of the papal coverage for us at EWTN, of course, the recent excellent coverage that we had of the Pope's visit to the UK and other high-profile international Catholic events which take place throughout the world. Ray has also been a guest on many secular news programs like The Today Show, Good Morning America, featured on Fox News and on CNN, and is a regular participant in Laura Ingram's show on radio. Ray has written multiple articles for magazines such as Newsweek, the Wall Street Journal newspaper, the Washington Times, the Financial Times, and other Catholic publications as well. Now, of course, we all know him really as the host and creator of our own EWTN award-winning international news magazine, The World Over Live. And, of course, highlights from The World Over include Raymond's exclusive landmark interview with Cardinal Joseph Ratzinger shortly before his election as Pope Benedict XVI. In addition, and in many ways so important, Raymond is the noted biographer of the New York Times bestseller, Mother Angelica, the remarkable story of a nun, her nerve, and a network of miracles, and this is her network we're celebrating today, as well as Mother. The editor of Mother Angelica's Little Book of Life Lessons, also Everyday Spirituality, Mother Angelica's Private and Pithy Lessons from the Scriptures, and last but not least, in fact, it's the latest, and one you should pick up, the Prayers and Personal Devotions of Mother Angelica. And, of course, Raymond will be around if you'd like to get one of those books signed by him this afternoon. And I would go to say that Raymond Arroyo is a Catholic media maven, engaging the culture of the world over, all that is seen and unseen and in between, and what all that means. And now, direct from the John Paul II Center in Washington, D.C., live, it's Raymond Arroyo.
Good evening, or afternoon, or good morning. Great to see you all. Thank you. It's very kind of you. It's nice to see so many of you. When I drove up and saw everybody having their cheeseburgers outside, I thought, I'll never get them inside. But I want to tell you, and echo what Doug said a moment ago, I come to honor Mother Angelica, not to bury her. Too many people, I think, you can applaud. There has been a little bit of confusion, I think, because of the nature of what we're doing here. This is a celebration of Mother's life and legacy. It is by no means the final word on that life and legacy. And a lot of reporters this week have called me, were you there when Mother passed away? What were her last words? Did she say anything? I said, what are you talking about? I just saw the woman last week. Anyway, I will tell you all about that a little later, but she is alive and well. You can take it from me. I want to start with something that I suppose seems apparent. It all began here in Canton, Ohio, in Southeast Canton. In Southeast Canton, to be specific, on April 20th, 1923, it was here that a little plump Italian girl had her first appearance, and that appearance would alter the history of the country and the world and the church. Rita Antoinette Rizzo came into the world forgotten, but not entirely ignored. You know, when my biography of Mother Angelica was first released, a novelist friend of mine read the manuscript, and he said, you know what I love about the book? He said, I love that this incredible figure came from this forgotten American hamlet where no one was looking for greatness. He said, it reminded me of another dusty city named Bethlehem. And I think that's right. There's something there. Now, some might be tempted to rush ahead and focus on the media empire that Mother Angelica founded, on the religious orders she began, on the teachings that have touched people all over the world. But if you'll indulge her biographer for a moment, I'd like to back up a little bit. I'd like to take things a little earlier and offer my own tribute to Mother by focusing on what I like to call the Canton years. because it's my belief that all that followed, everything she would become, everything she would give the world, had its origin and its foundation right here, in this place. It all began here. Mother Angelica grew up just off Cherry Street, not too far from here. Now, this was, at the time, Canton's red light district. It was a notorious district, distinguished by gangland violence, racketeering joints, roving prostitutes. This nun did not grow up in Mayberry. And that's a good thing, thank God, because she absorbed at a very early age, and she didn't forget the lessons she would learn on those streets. Her grandfather, Anthony Gianfrancesco, owned a saloon at the corner of Liberty and 11th Street. 11th Street is just out the door here. Mother told me this wonderful story. She said, I couldn't have been more than 4 or 5. And my grandfather didn't want me in the saloon. So he gave me a little mug of beer with a big collar on it. And this is during Prohibition, incidentally, okay? And he said, go out to the curb there and enjoy yourself. So I'm out there, I'm eating my pretzels, I'm drinking my beer. And up comes the Salvation Army band. Well, they're praying all kinds of psalms over this fallen child. They're beating their drums and singing. They must have thought, what a scene this was, this kid drinking beer in front of a saloon. And I remember yelling up to my grandfather, hey, Grandpa, there's a band down here. Little Rita literally had a front row seat at humanity, unvarnished. Human nature at its rawest form, the good, the bad, and occasionally the very ugly. And if you thought Mother Angelica's family was a kind of retiring, sober, pious lot, think again. Her mother, May, was a tempestuous, emotionally fragile, manically depressed woman. She had a will of iron. Mother Angelica told me how May Rizzo, on one occasion, began prowling the house looking for a gun to shoot her mother-in-law. I'm not making this up. You didn't want to get on her bad side, I tell you. Now, May's marriage to John Rizzo, Mother Angelica's father, quickly deteriorated. He abandoned his wife and child and began dating women around town. Now, at the time, this was considered scandalous. Today, it would get you a talk show, but at the time, and even today, to most of us, this is scandalous. This sent May Rizzo, watching her husband run around with these other women, sent her right over the edge. It turned little Rita into an adult far before her time. She became the emotional crutch for her mother, the support. Suddenly, this child became the rock of the family. Rita became the mother of the house, May's greatest cheerleader and defender. And before you judge her too harshly, there are a couple of things you should know about May Rizzo. And again, it's the way in which God layers and creates and shapes a life. May Rizzo, everyone I interviewed told me, she was a dazzling storyteller. She could hold people in thrall for hours with her stories. She would just spin these things. It came naturally to her. I believe her daughter probably inherited the gene. I've never seen anybody in the history of television, because they don't exist, that does an hour of television, 2 hours a week, with absolutely no script at all. This was all extempore. When you see those Mother Angelica live shows, she would sit in the chair 3 minutes before she came out. She'd flip open the Bible. What are we going to talk about tonight? Oh, yeah, that's good. And the show just came out. I believe she got a little bit of that from May Rizzo. She, I believe, also learned something else from her mother. Her mother was an entrepreneur. When John Rizzo walked out on the family, May Rizzo started a dry cleaning business. She started a tailor shop. And Rita was right there next to her, delivering clothes, bundling clothes, wrapping them up, making deliveries, getting receipts. So she learned all of that. And you see how Mother Angelica's understanding of heartache, her entrepreneurial spirit, her way with a story. It all began here. Something else emerged from young Rita and her time here in Canton: pain and suffering. You can imagine what Rita was going through. Her mother was a basket case. The father is gone. She's not doing well in school at all. It was a trial. And all of this created stomach abnormalities. She was very nervous, and they couldn't figure out what was wrong with her stomach. They finally diagnosed her with ptosis of the stomach, a fallen stomach. Searching for relief, Rita's mother took her to the home of a local mystic here in Canton, Ohio, Rhoda Wise. According to the papers and Wise herself, she saw Jesus, St. Therese of Lisieux. They would literally walk into her bedroom and converse with her. She experienced a healing as a result of that interaction. She also, on Fridays, would bleed from her hands and her head and her feet. She was a stigmatist. Every Friday during Lent, she would bleed. Hundreds would come to see her, to get a glimpse of her stigmata, to talk with her, to have her pray for them. And Rita also went seeking a cure. She went reluctantly, though. She didn't have much faith. She told me that. She really only went because her mother was so excited about it, and anything that would please her mother, Rita was happy to comply with. So she went along. Now, Wise did not touch Rita. She didn't lay hands on her. She merely instructed her to pray a 9-day novena and ask St. Therese of Lisieux for healing. They all prayed the prayer, and 9 days later she woke up and she was fine. The stomach was cured. This was a pivotal event because it revealed God's love for little Rita. It was the first time she realized that there was a Father in heaven, if not on earth, who cared about her intensely, loved her, and was watching personally after her welfare. It would change her life. And shortly after that, perhaps at that moment, she fell madly in love with God, with our Lord, and desired to be with him, to enter a religious community. Now, I mention Rhoda Wise for a couple of reasons. She was the first person who showed Mother Angelica. She didn't tell her, she showed her that pain could redeem. That pain, though not welcome, could be used by God for infinite good. And that sometimes this is how God deals with his beloved ones. That suffering offered up to God could provide astounding results. And that lesson stuck. This poor woman, Rhoda Wise, she went through hell. Terrible, terrible surgery, repeated surgeries on her abdomen, exposed wounds. Then she had a little time where she thought she was out of the woods, things were getting better. She goes to a Christmas party with her husband and falls into an open drain and rips her leg open, which becomes infected. I mean, the woman, it was one disastrous occurrence after another, one physical cross after another. And yet this is the instrument that God would use to, I think, reveal to so many, but particularly to this young girl, to Rita Rizzo, that Christ's passion was real. That Christ himself was not a concept or a theory or a picture, but a reality, a living reality, a God who moved through the lives of his people and could be seen and felt. She had never experienced anything quite like Rhoda Wise before. She would never forget this lesson. Rhoda Wise also, if you think about it, she's the first person that Mother Angelica comes in contact with who claimed divine communication. So it would be perfectly normal for her as she went on in life to converse with Jesus directly, to feel his presence directly. At times, Mother too said she saw the baby Jesus. She saw God in various incarnations, saints and angels. It familiarized her with this mystical appreciation and spirituality that otherwise would have been deprived to her. There's something else about Rhoda that I was thinking of as I passed the house the other day. You have to go back to the 1930s and 40s and realize there were hundreds and hundreds of people packing into that house, particularly on Good Fridays during Lent. I've seen the pictures. There were just mobs of people outside the house. And they would stream in, and Miss Wise would sit on a chair, and Rita would sit next to her. She watched how Rhoda dealt with an adoring public, people who wanted to touch and feel and be prayed for, the way she cared and took time with each person. These two are lessons, I believe, Mother Angelica, consciously or unconsciously, absorbed and in later life put into use. I can remember many a night after the live show with her, when she was bone tired. I mean, the woman had the braces and the running around the network and her monastery and back out to the network at night. She'd do the live show. She was just exhausted. She'd been up since 5. She didn't sleep particularly well. And I remember one evening, all the people who had seen the show, she met with everyone in the room, in the studio, but there was another couple of bus groups that were watching in another building. And we went out the side door, and her car was there, and she was about to get into the car. And I said, well, go ahead now, because, the bus is coming. You want to, everybody's going to see you. They'll get all excited. Go now. You're tired. And she sat down in the car, and then the bus pulled up. And people were beating on the windows and waving, and they wanted to see her. The doors of the bus come open. People start streaming out. It's 10 o'clock at night. And I said, well, go ahead, go ahead. And she put her hand up on the rim of the car and pulled herself up. She said, they've come a long way. They're tired. We'll go see them. I said, you've come a long way. You're tired. You need to go home. But she didn't. She stayed. She sat on the hood of that car and signed autographs and took pictures and prayed with people for another hour. And again, it's testament to her consideration, her kindness, her understanding, her heart for the people who had come, not to see her, to see what God had done with her, I think. She's a witness. We'll talk about that in a little bit. Following this healing, Rita fell madly in love with God. And you know how love is. It's sudden, it's uncontrollable. It's overwhelming, and it was like that. It was a thunderclap in the life of this girl. Totally transformed her. She trusted him completely. She allowed his providence to take her places she never imagined. She was working at the time at the Timken Roller Bearing Company here in town, in the ad department, curiously enough. She did layouts, commercials. She knew how to sell products. These, too, would be important lessons, foundations that she would need for the mission that God would call her to later in life. You see how the pieces start coming together in this life. It's the same with all of us. We don't often stand back far enough to take a peek and see. But you see how God puts all of these little pieces into place, and his design becomes manifest, becomes clearer. Privately, she'd begun a regimen of praying the ways of the cross at St. Anthony's Church at Sacred Heart Parish here in town. She would receive her vocation there. She would eventually make the decision to enter a monastery there. In 1944 of August, she would enter that monastery. It all began here. And it wasn't easy. It wasn't easy for May to leave her mother. They were very close. She was an enormous support system for her mother. So she wrote a letter to May. She dropped it, had it delivered to the house as she boarded a bus for Cleveland, Ohio, to enter the monastery there. Well, you can imagine her mother went to pieces. But she felt she had to go. As she told me once I get an inspiration, I never question it. I know myself, and I believe if God wants it, he has a plan. If you're following God, he never shows you the end. It's always a walk of faith. Franciscan virtue is to follow the providence of God. And God's providence goes as far as you go. That's the scary thing about it. If you don't go, he won't go. And go she did. Eventually, a new monastery sprang up here in Canton, Ohio, Sancta Clara. Mother Angelica, Sister Angelica then, would be its founding member. But cloistered life was not always smooth. You know, we have these rosy pictures of what, if only I could live in a cloister, how perfect it would be. Let me tell you, as the sisters here can attest, it's really a microcosm of the world in there. You know, it's all the same difficulties, foibles, human struggles, confusion, personality conflicts. It's just, you're all confined together. you know? I'm going to read you this little excerpt. I came across this the other day. I hadn't read it in years, and it made me laugh. But it illustrates what life was like in the monastery of Santa Clara at the time. I want to say at the time, because I don't want the nuns there now to think I'm talking about them. I'm not. This is the 1947, okay? Through the makeshift wooden grill in the O'Day living room, John O'Day owned the house that was donated to the nuns. That was a chapel. It was turned into a chapel. May Frances, who was Mother Angelica's mother, Rhoda Wise, and other guests watched the nuns gather on the cloister side of the chapel. Sister Angelica knelt at a prie-dieu, her head piously bent. She was about to take her first profession in the monastery, receive her habit. Intruding on the piece, the choir director, Mary of the Cross, began heatedly arguing music technique with her sister organist. Voices slowly escalated. Suddenly, the two nuns were at each other. The organist refusing to play, Mary of the Cross threatening to toss her into the snow if she didn't.
And I'm sitting there trying to recollect myself from my vows, Mother Angelica told me. The people must have thought we were nuts.
The nuns returned to their corner, the organist resuming her somber melody, and Mary of the Cross taking her place at the prie-dieu. Moments later, a bug scampered across the floor of the chapel. Mary of the Cross rose up, lifted the kneeler with both hands, and pounded the ground, attempting to annihilate the bug. Like a mad woman with a jackhammer, she repeatedly wielded the prie-dieu, hurling it and herself at the crawler. The organist, thinking this an underhanded critique of her playing, pounded louder on the keys. Sister Angelica could not believe what she termed the shenanigans she was witnessing. Then the bishop walked in, sopping wet and complaining about his car, which had stalled several blocks away in the snow. The bishop requested a change of socks. The abbess instructed Sister Angelica to go fetch him a pair. When she returned to her place at the opening of the grill, the bishop laid a fitting crown of thorns atop the head of Sister Angelica. Then he goes to put the wedding ring on. You know, they put the ceremonial wedding ring on their hands. And the ring didn't fit on her finger. This is the way of Mother Angelica. Tempestuous, funny, dramatic, a little painful. There were emotional strains, and there were also physical ones. Sister Angelica found it hard to walk. She was in and out of the hospital in the early 1950s, which is something I discovered in working on the book. Traction, minor surgeries. They tried everything they could. She was beginning to double over and couldn't stand erect. She told me later, I've been sick all my life. I don't remember a day I haven't been sick with something. I think our dear Lord's hand was on me, though. I've had cross after cross after cross from the earliest time I can remember. But it kept me dependent on the Lord to do whatever He asked me to do. The pain was a safety for me because I could never give myself credit for anything accomplished. It's a protection. It's like a shield for me. In 1953, her dance with pain and providence and God's will resumed. She was scrubbing a floor in the Canton Monastery right over here, 1953. One of the nuns, Joan Frank, who's here, I think she's here today, she was in the monastery at the time and cleaning the floor with Mother. Instead of putting the soap on, a little bit, she decided to hit the whole floor with soap. Then she brought this scrubber out and went across the floor. And it spun out of control and slammed her against the wall, and it irritated a spinal defect, making it impossible for her to walk, and she was forced to undergo surgery in 1956. And it was a pretty serious surgery. They were fusing the spine together because it was the only way for her to be erect. In the hospital bed, the doctor came in and said, there's a good chance you won't walk again. There's a 50-50 chance that this may not work. And in her panic, in her desperation, she made a deal with God.
She said, if you let me walk again, I'll build a monastery to your honor in the South.
Now, she did walk again with the aid of crutches and a brace that ran down her back and both legs, leading her to comment later,
when you make a deal with God, be very specific.
And you should be. You know, all of this almost didn't happen. It almost didn't happen. What we later discovered, and those of you who read the book know, the reason she went down to Birmingham, Alabama, is she wanted to pray for the racial situation there, to bring the racial tensions down. She'd been reading about the unrest, the bombings happening. They called it Bombingham at the time. So she wanted to have a monastery in the midst of all of that and bring blacks and whites together, to have an interracial monastery. That was the first vision. Didn't pan out that way. But that's the reason she went to that particular spot. But none of this almost happened. EWTN, her monastery, all of us together today, this almost didn't occur at all. Because in 1956, when she raised the possibility of building a monastery in the South, another sister, Sister Mary of the Cross of the Stamping Pray-Do, that one, wanted to start her own monastery in Minnesota. So you have this stalemate. The abbess decided to set up a contest. She said, each of you write your bishop, you in Minnesota, you in Birmingham, and whoever writes back first, that sister may begin work on a foundation. She sent the letter out, and thankfully, hers came back first. Mother was cute when she told me about the way it came in.
She said, oh, mine got there about 4 days before hers. Ha ha.
Now, as you can imagine, this did not make relations happy and peaceful in Santa Clara. But Mother took it in stride, as she would throughout her life. She said,
I'm not here to win friends and influence people. I'm here to do God's will. Now, the accomplishment of that will, if that bugs some people, well, that's their problem.
I like that philosophy. Sisters who were there at the time remember a bubbly, vivacious Angelica, a young nun who was as funny as she was industrious. She was always into something. Always building and leading and moving, new projects. We got to rebuild the wall. We've got to fix this up. We got to redo the pipes. We'll do this. We'll do that. A doer, a captivating storyteller as well. Someone able to inspire young women, young novices, particularly a band of emotionally tender novices who were having a tough time with the rigidity of life then. She understood those who were emotionally fragile, those who needed a little help. She had a lot of training taking care of May Rizzo, her mother. It shows you again the way God works, how he shapes, how he molds. In 1958, her abbess wanted her to erect a grotto to Our Lady in the backyard of the monastery. And Angelica got right to work. She picked up the phone and solicited help from all quarters. Everybody she knew, contractors, builders, people who were into brick, called everybody. No one would help her. So she went to her abbess and she said, Mother Abbess, I know some other people who might be able to help. And the abbess said, I don't care who you call, just get it done, get the work done. So she picked up the phone and she called a pool hall in southeast Canton over here. She got a fellow on the line and she said, hey, when did you get out of jail? That was the beginning, the opener. And she said, look, I'm having a little trouble down here. I need some of the boys to come help me. And they did. They came out. Now, look, people say, oh, look at this. She's consorting with these terrible people. Some have even suggested, I heard in recent days, some foolish person said, the mafia helped her build everything she built. Oh, please. Please. I'm going to read you a little story that's cute. She did call the head of the syndicate here in Canton, whose name shall remain nameless because I value my life. And hey, I'm a Sicilian, so I'm not gonna out my people. But she said, she called the head of the local syndicate, and she said she needed $600 for hemlock trees she wanted to line the path of this grotto. And he said, all right, I'll write you a check for it. She said, no, I don't want you to do that. I want you to get checks from all the boys and give them to me. And I'm going to put their names on a piece of parchment. I'm going to roll it up, and I'm going to put it inside the statue of Our Lady. He said, are you nuts? You can't do that. And she said, nobody's going to see it. It's going to be buried in concrete, like you're going to be one of these days if you don't straighten up. The mob boss said nothing. See what you can do, she said, and she placed a Sacred Heart badge in his pocket. A few days later, the limo pulls up. He gets out. He gives her a stack of checks. And he asked her, and this is key. He said, do you really want people like me to buy these trees? And she said, yes, I do. I need people like you to buy these trees so that one day, if you're in a lot of trouble, you'll remember the Lord and you'll remember his mother. There is nothing wrong. You know, I get a little impatient when I hear some of this stuff. Mother Angelica, whether over the television airwaves or in her personal life, made redemption and Christ's promise available to all people, no matter who they were, particularly those who were struggling and had no other outlet. Somebody else did the same thing. He was also criticized for running around with fornicators and tax collectors and terrible people. It's the one Mother Angelica follows. This is part of the mission of the church, to reach out to those who are truly suffering, lost. If you can't put a hand out to them, what are you doing? We're not here to make the saved feel good. It's about throwing that safety line out, and that's what she's done for all these years, whether as a little girl or in her personal life or later via television. All these experiences would serve her well. When she sat in front of that television camera, when she looked into that lens and she spoke unscripted all those many years, she understood the heartache. She understood the confusion. She understood the strains and the blessings that the working people were encountering each day. People like us. She was street smart, street savvy. She spoke the language of the street, language that she picked up right here on the streets of Canton. Jesus in the book of Matthew says, because you have so little faith, I tell you the truth. If you have faith as small as a mustard seed, you can say to this mountain, move here to there, and it will move. Nothing will be impossible for you. That is what Mother Angelica had. The faith of a mustard seed. Tiny. But it has grown. These many, many decades, it has grown. And that seed has now become this great towering tree whose limbs reach up to heaven, and it casts long shadows. Shadows that cover her friends, her former co-workers, her community, millions around the world who only know her image and voice, even though she hasn't spoken publicly for almost a decade. That is the power of faith. Faith. One afternoon she told me, my life has been a life of faith. And I believe in my heart that I know when Jesus asks me to do something, I have to do it. I only have to try to do whatever he asks of me. He is the one who leads the way, and he moves one step at a time. That's why when people ask, how'd you get this network? I always say it evolved. It was never planned. It was an act of God. Our witness is the total providence of God. This work evolved as long as we kept up with God. And the work of Mother Angelica continues to evolve today, to this very hour. Though she resigned from active leadership in 2001, her apostolate, EWTN, and the vision she had to provide light to those in darkness, hope to those lost in a cycle of hopelessness, that goes on. You know, I saw her a few weeks ago, and I'm happy to report she was communicative, she was happy, she was still the spunky, saucy number I've come to know and love. She's sitting up and she has a joy and a radiance about her, and I've said that before, but, you know, when someone is confined to a room, one room, for any period of time, there is, and if you've been around people who've been ill, you can see them sort of retreat from life. You know, this veil drops. They become disinterested. She happily bears none of those marks. She is remarkably engaged and focused and intensely aware, I think, and concerned about what's going on, about people who are visiting, about the lives of her sisters and the community. And that's wonderful to see. You know, as I left the other day, when I left her room, my attention fell on the picture, this kind of mustard-colored crude painting that once hung in Rhoda Wise's house. It's Jesus with the crown of thorns. It's a close-up of Jesus. And now it hangs over Mother Angelica's bed. And I thought, as I was coming here to Canton, there's a physical reminder of all that went before. The pains, the joys, the blessings, the spirituality that she learned here on the streets of Canton. It's like the circle is coming all the way around again. And I thought then, no matter where you are, no matter where you're born, it all begins there as well. God has a plan. The thrilling example of Mother Angelica's life can be yours as well. Each of us has the opportunity to reach the heights we're shaped for if we take the time to listen to God's promptings, if we take the moment to be sensitive to His will in each present moment, if we have the guts to move forward and risk losing everything for that vision and that faith. Mother Angelica did all that and much, much more. The legacy of Mother Angelica is larger than this network or even what she accomplished here in Canton. When I asked her what she believed her legacy was, she said it was her foundation, her sisters, and the foundations she hoped they would go on to create and raise in her stead all over the country and the world. That is happening. For the rest of us, I believe the legacy of Mother Angelica can be summed up in her famous line, "Do the ridiculous so God can do the miraculous." Hers is an example of stubborn faith, radical trust in God, and a belief that no matter what happens, God is with us. He's watching. He cares deeply. It's central, not only to Mother Angelica's story, it's central to our story as well. And it is true, as I've been sounding throughout this speech, it does truly all begin here in each of us, now, wherever we are. I hope you'll embrace that challenge. I hope you'll embrace her amazing witness, and it's a witness that goes on and on in silence, whether we see it or not. And she is something to behold. And God bless her. Thank you all for coming out today. Thank you for giving me a little of your time. Thank you. Please sit down. Thank you. That's very kind of you. Thank you. And I know she'll be watching this, so watch your questions. No nasty questions. Anybody who has a question, just come up in the middle of the aisle. There's a microphone. You got to come out. I can't. I can hear you because I have Superman-like hearing, but the other people. And anybody else who has a question, just line up in the middle there. Yes, sir.
I heard there was a strange miracle that occurred when Mother Angelica needed the antenna.
In the early 80s, or actually it was 1978, Mother Angelica was trying to buy a satellite dish, the big honker satellite dish. I feel like there's an assassin up here in the stands. It's disconcerting when you're on stage and you hear popping in the distance and you're me, you know? And I just invoked the mob in Canton. I don't want to... I don't... No, you're free, right? You went through the metal detector and everything, you're okay? Yeah, I'm not Glenn Beck. I don't wear bulletproof anything. I'm clean. I got the angels watching me. That's it. Anyway, she was looking for a satellite dish, and these things were very expensive. I think it was $1.5 million or something to buy one of these things. Very expensive at the time. And she could not find anyone to send her a satellite dish. So she finally got a list of all the executives at RCA, which were the makers of this satellite dish. And she went down the list, and she was looking for any name that ended in A, I, or O, an Italian whose arm she could twist. Hey, you got to work with the people you know. She finds a VP, she gets him on the phone, and he told me, he said, I felt like Joe Frazier in the 13th round with this woman on the phone. Because he picks up, hello?
Hello.
Who's this?
It's Mother Angelica. I'm down in Birmingham, Alabama. I'm so happy to talk to you. I'm building a Catholic television network. Isn't that awesome?
Great. What can I do for you?
Well, that's why I'm calling. I need your help.
Well, what kind of help do you need?
But you make those dishes, those great big dishes. I need one of those.
And he said, yeah, well, they're several $1 million. I assume, yeah. So, do you have collateral for this thing?
Well, that's why I'm calling you, sweetheart.
He said, well, I don't know what I can do for you. I can't give you the money. What are you asking? But,
well, we got to work on faith. You could send the satellite, and then, we can work something out.
So he kind of churned this over, and remarkably, he said he just felt defeated because she wouldn't get off the phone. He said, look. I'm going to send, I'll authorize the delivery of this thing, but let me tell you, you must have a down payment of $600,000 on the day of delivery. Do you understand that?
Yes.
Can you get that kind of money?
The Lord can do anything.
She hangs up the phone. 3 weeks, yeah, woo, until the next part of the story. Ladies wooing over here. We haven't even finished. Day of the delivery comes. Here comes the flatbed truck. They're bringing out the satellite dishes, all the equipment. Oh, she is beaming, happy, on the crutches. She's practically dancing out to the delivery truck. The guy gets out. The first thing he asks, where's Mother Angelica? She comes over. Hello. He says, we need a down payment before I can move any of this. The shipping order here says I got to have a down payment of $600,000. I need that check in hand. Do you have that now?
Sweetheart, have you ever been to a monastery before? Let me take you on a little tour. Come on, let's go.
She tours him all around. She's plying him with cannolis, anything to stall. She doesn't have one red dime. Nada. Nothing. So after doing this dance for about 20 minutes, she goes toward the chapel, and she says, you wait here just 1 second. I'll be right back. She goes into the chapel. She kneels down. She looks up at the Blessed Sacrament, her Lord. You husbands will recognize this approach.
Well, your satellite's out front. You wanted the satellite, it's out front, now the man needs to be paid. She says, your satellite, I didn't want this thing, you wanted it. So now you're going to have to pay for it, I guess.
And I guess she waited for the money to fall from the ceiling, which did not happen that day. So she went out to turn the delivery away. And this is a wonderful thing about Mother and her whole approach to spirituality. She would push and push and push like a Navy fleet. But when that door closed, when she felt there was no further that she could push, she dropped it, would totally drop it. So at that moment, she decided, I'm going to go turn this delivery away. She goes out. She's telling the man, look, I don't have the money. You're going to have to turn. One of the nuns comes running over from the monastery. She says, Mother, there's a man on the phone. He won't get off the phone. Please come take this call. He's called repeatedly. We can't pray, and he won't let us eat. He's been calling and calling and calling. He says he needs to talk to you, and he needs to talk to you right now. You must come over and talk to him, please. It's an emergency. He's going on, and please. Jesus, Mary, and Joseph, sister, I got big business here. She says, Mother, please just take this call. It'll be real fast. Oh, just give me a minute, she tells the delivery man. She goes into the monastery. She picks up the phone. Remember, at the time, Mother was printing these little mini books. They were just little pamphlets on the religious life. Well, one of these got into the possession of this businessman. He was calling from his yacht in the Bahamas. This little mini book had helped him reconcile with his family, get off of drugs, and he decided at that point that he wanted to donate something to this little nun's book ministry. So he was calling to make a donation of $600,000. Well, she hears this. Can you send it right now, she says. He wired the money into the account. That day, I saw the receipt myself. That is the money that was the down payment for the satellite that to this moment beams EWTN all over North and South America, and a testament to her deep faith to the very, very end. That's the story you want. Yes, sir.
I know you got a great sense of humor, so if you could tell a nice story. I know it was in your book, and you mentioned it when he met the Holy Father, John Paul, and when Mother Angelica met the Holy Father.
When Mother met the Holy Father?
Yeah, could you tell us something? But, maybe underneath what did she receive, or what did John Paul, the interaction, the dynamic, or how did this help her maybe with her ministry?
Well, he was very fond of Mother, as you know, and she made a couple of visits to see him. They were all very tender visits. Mother, I think, was deeply touched by his sort of paternal affection for her, and commented to me often how fatherly he was, how tender he was. You see in that picture how, the sweet look on her. She looks like little Rita Rizzo. That picture, sweet. But she had great, affection for him. And I think one of the highlights of her life, Mother was not much for honors, didn't, care for all the worldly things. But I think one of the great things that she did treasure is when he told her, Mother Angelica, strong woman of faith. And that made her day. So, no, he was very supportive of the work of EWTN, and more importantly, the vision that only now, if you go back, as I have, and you look at the articles written in the 80s, even into the 90s about Mother Angelica, the calumnies, the name taken in vain in so many parlance of the church, deriding her as some lunatic for wearing her habit, for insisting on Eucharistic adoration, reverence for the Lord and the Mass, liturgical purity, consistent with what the Vatican had been teaching from time immemorial. She was derided for that. Now we see in the flowering of these beautiful orders, Mother Assumpta's order, the Nashville Dominicans, the Contemplatives all over the world, Franciscan order I just learned of here in Northern Ohio. You see young women coming, and men. They want to do the right thing. And largely they are led, whether they realize it or not. The space that they now occupy in the church was carved out, fought over, and created by Mother Mary Angelica. The reason I'm surviving, and I believe this network is surviving, is because of her prayers, sufferings, and oblations offered in Hanceville, Alabama to this moment. Thank you.